Hey guys, welcome back to Home Theater Guru. So today we're going to be talking about something that's killing Dolby Atmos performance. And this is extremely common. Now we've already gone over poor placement. We've got episode 49 to help you place your Atmos speaker. So you're going to hear what is intended, assuming you do this correctly, which is going to be how to aim the speakers. And a lot of times people are choosing poor choices for Dolby Atmos. Most manufacturers don't really have an ideal, and that's the key word, an ideal Atmos speaker. And even worse, there's some companies out there that have down-firing speakers, and people will say that that's okay, you can do that, because this far off axis, they have a good response, but they're not looking at what happens past that. They're not thinking about the seat to seat, and they're not really able to dial those speakers in at all, and it's actually somewhat disastrous to the performance. All right, here's a little disclaimer. I actually design home theaters, so we're gonna look at some feedback from some of my clients. Now, I want you to understand some of these rooms that these guys are comparing it to had very expensive gear, like Trinov and, you know, a couple $100,000 in speakers. That's some of the rooms that are gonna be compared in these comparisons, but the rooms that these guys had cost a fraction of the price. The first one right here is a guy from AVS. He had some people over at his house. Now the guys that, you know, they have what they call get-togethers. The guys that were listening, that left these two little mini reviews, if you want to call it that, they've been all over the United States, just going to get-togethers, listening to home theaters. Now this is the way that I design the rooms, the way I place the speakers, and the way we were able to tow them in, or dial them in is a better word. The Atmos speakers need to be dialed in. All right, just want to let you know I had a few friends over from AVS Forum over a few weekends ago and got lots of compliments on how everything sounded. Here's the first one. The 3D sound feel was absolutely seamless. The best Atmos I've heard to date. Now remember, these guys have gone all over the country listening to different rooms. All right, now here's another guy. My favorite thing was the precision your system has in placing objects around the room. I thought it was the best part. All right, now this one right here, this is a client, had a triad setup that I designed. Of course, everything is ideally placed. Now he's comparing it to one of the larger online retailers, has some demo rooms, a couple spots around the nation. And he went and listened to one of their JBL synthesis room that, I don't know, had like $90,000 in JBL synthesis. His room had a reference level capable triad room, but it still was a fraction of the price. And I asked him about his Atmos. Now the other speakers, we're not talking about those, but he felt his room sounded just as good as the bed layer of the JBL system. And I asked him if his Atmos performance was better. He said absolutely. Their Atmos, to be honest, sucked. My room is 3 times as immersive, and I'm not lying. Yes, their Atmos is really wide, much further forward too. All right, let's do one more. This one is a faux cow room. This was a high-end demo room, fully treated, had a Trinov, even, I think the guy said like a Trinov rep actually came in and tuned the room. But again, this is placement and also better speakers. Now when I say better speakers, they may not cost as much. I think these even had beryllium tweeters in that faux cow room. The problem is, it doesn't matter how good a speaker is, if you're limited or if there are compromises in some aspect of it, you can't properly aim them. The mains are installed flat, they're in walls, installed flat in the wall. You know, you can really cripple really good speakers where the in performance is not great. So here's his little mini review after he got his system up and running. A raw test with an old uncalibrated Marantz amp and CD player. The Triad are hands down better than the faux cow, calibrated and being pushed by ATI amps and a Trinov processor. And we have not even put up the front wall yet. Damn and thank you. So some people think a Trinov is magic. Now, of course, if they want you to spend that money, they're going to have to make you think that it's magic. And the guys that just spent that money want everyone else to think it's magic. In reality, it cannot fix placement issues. It has some remapping magic that it can do. It still cannot fix placement issues. It cannot beat a room that is better set up, better laid out, better acoustics. It's not magic. So, you know, just because a room has a Trinov doesn't mean a lot. Doesn't mean it's gonna, you know, perform your room. If your room is better laid out, you know, it's not going to stand a chance unless the Trinov room is equally laid out and set up as well. You know, when that happens, then yeah, the Trinov has got a, you know, more powerful processor. You should expect it to slightly outperform your room, you know, with a maybe not as quite as good a processor. Doesn't mean you may not even hear it though, because there's so much that you can do with proper placement, proper room acoustics. I mean, you can really compete with some really high-end gear. All right, so we still need to discuss a couple things. How should you toe in your speakers and dial them in? And before we do that, we need to look at what happens on and off axis. It's very important, and we're going to look at a speaker that is very, very commonly misunderstood, and that's the KEF 220. But if I use a KEF bed layer, I am not using a KEF for in ceiling because they don't have anything. They don't have an Atmos speaker. They don't have anything aimed. But we're going to look at what confuses people, and you'll hear that, oh, this speaker is perfect for Atmos, and you're going to understand here in a minute why it is absolutely not. Okay, so here we are in Audio Science Review. They do great reviews of speakers. They measure them, I mean, and it kind of is what it is. The information you get, it just is what it is. So we're looking at the KEF 220. It's a down 5-inch speaker. Now, a lot of people are worried, you know, I have to have the same tweeter as the rest of my system. That's great if you can do it, but if the performance is bad, it's a bad choice. Just having the same tweeter does not make it a good choice, or the mid-range, you know, whatever, the same drivers. It doesn't make it timbre matched. Because if you look at the on-axis response right here, I guarantee you that their mains and their center, they're not going to look like that. So it's not timbre matched anyway. The on-axis is not great, but one thing that we need to understand when we look at speakers is the on-axis being great is not as important as the on and off axis being similar. We want the off axis to resemble it because we all use room correction. So all the little wiggles and stuff that you see here, the red line here is on axis. It's going to be corrected. Everybody uses room correction. If you're looking at a speaker purely for its on-axis raw response and you're using that to judge the speaker you buy, you're doing it wrong because we're all going to use room correction. You could be passing up a fantastic speaker because it's got a little dip that's not even going to exist once we tune the room. Much more important things are, you know, the dynamics, you know, compression, and the on and off axis is extremely important. Probably the most important thing. So if you look right here, there's a note. Response is actually better at 40 degrees. Makes it a good fit for Atmos height duty. Completely disagree. Can't disagree more. And here's why. First of all, here's the red line. That's on axis. Our sensitivity is based on that, by the way. So if we put a speaker 45 forward, 45 out, we're going to be about 55 degrees in the main listening position, give or take. So the blue line here is at 40 degrees. We're not at 40. The only seat that's going to be even 45 is the seat in line with that speaker. It's going to be 45. So we're close to the blue line with that. But he's saying it's a good Atmos speaker because it's more linear. Again, linear is not as important because we're going to use room correction. So we've lost a lot of sensitivity sitting at 40 degrees. But we're not at 40 degrees.
We're closer to 50 to 55 degrees in the main listening position.
Probably 50. We're somewhere up in here where these huge dips are beginning to take place. Let's scroll up a little bit. We're going to look at the polar. And you're going to see he's even got a note. Plus or minus 50 degrees is the usable, that's the window we need to stay in. And you can see why. Here's 50 degrees. We are losing a ton of output over here, like 1200 hertz, you know, over 2000 right here. Just we're having a lot of issues, and these even start before that, but you know, that's probably starting at 40 or 35, 40 degrees up in here, and the same thing up in here as well. But anyway, here's the 50 degree line. In that, if we get past that, all of a sudden we are just having horrible upper energy. We're losing a ton of it. It's not going to sound anything like it does even at 40, much less on axis. And we can see that here where we have these huge drop-offs like a cliff, and even right here. So what's going to happen is all the seats are going to sound different, and not in a good way. Sound different's never a good thing. But as we move over here to the main listening position, you're going to have much less upper energy. And I mean, we're talking about from what, like 800 hertz, it starts dropping, and it just gets worse as you go in higher in frequency. It's going to sound vastly weaker. And as you move over here, you're barely going to hear that speaker. So when objects are moving around, depending on where you're sitting, you're going to be heavily drawn to the closer Atmos speaker, even if you move your head a foot over, because you're so close to the edge of that 50 degree, you know, where it just drops off like a rock. this is a very, very poor choice for an Atmos speaker, in my opinion. Now, if this speaker was aimed, we would be close to the red line. Now, look what happens around the red line. You see how all the little squiggles, they're all very, very close. I mean, you know, the red is 0, then you've got 10, 20, 30, you know, probably up to about 30 degrees, it's staying relatively close. You know, it would be so close that you wouldn't have a lot of variation. Now that would be if you could aim the speaker. If this speaker was aimable, it would be a fantastic Atmos speaker. And of course, it's got a little hump there, you know, and some dips. The on axis, this is not perfect, it's not pretty, but we're gonna fix that with room correction. So it's okay. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit of sense. And we can also look at, you know, another example. It's kind of similar to our main speaker. Say our main, just take the right or left main. We wanna, you know, it's out here, but we're going to toe it in. We've already got an episode on how to adjust toe in and how to dial it in using peak noise. What we want is an even tonality, even across all of the seats. So if we got it aimed at the seats, we're on axis. Now that speaker that was 50, you know, if we go 45 forward, 45 out, we're going to be about 50, 55 degrees off axis. So look how far that is, okay? This is about 45 degrees. We're going to go a little bit more. How are you going to get good sound from this speaker? If this was your main speaker and when you sat down, it was aimed this far away from you, how are you going to have good sound? And just think what happens as you move further, you know, to the side seats. And then as you move to these seats, you're closer to on axis. So it's going to start to sound better, and over here it's sounding worse. That's what you're doing with a speaker that's aiming straight down. The only person, or the only thing in the room getting good sound is the dog sitting on the floor directly under the speaker. But you boosted everything because you're so far off axis, he's probably wondering what the heck. He probably thinks he's got bad hearing or something. But no, it's just bad Atmos setup, poor dog. All right, so now how do you aim your Atmos to get exceptional Atmos? So let's look at that real quick. Now this is out of the Trinov white pages. This one right here is a really, really good example of how to get great aiming out of your Atmos speakers. All right, so notice how their speakers are aiming at the opposite listening position. All right, as mentioned in previous articles, having angled mounting such as depicted here is usually not practical. That's because usually it takes a bookshelf on a bracket. I only know of one in ceiling that can pull it off, made by Triad. No other speaker that and we're gonna look at a guy using that. We've already seen a few examples in some of the feedback that I gave you guys, but we're gonna look at another one just in a minute, just about the aiming of that speaker. But there are speakers available with angled baffles that can accomplish at least some of the effect as angling the speakers as shown in these diagrams. The difference in both imaging and sound quality is significant. Now, a lot of people will probably think it's not. You know, you don't have to aim Atmos. How many times have we heard that? That is a big, fat, false statement. Very few speakers perform well at such extreme off-axis angles, which is why we need to aim them. The goal should be to have each speaker's best sound aimed into the listening position, and that is key. Remember that KEF, what happens if we could get that on axis at the seats? Remember how similar the responses were? That would be the window of good sound that we want to aim towards our listening position. If we look at what's happening here in the picture, the further seat is on axis. Okay, now remember what happens is as we get off axis, we are losing energy, but we're sitting closer. Because we're sitting closer, we're gaining energy. This is a type of leveling effect, and what you can actually do, we've already had an episode on this with our mains, but also mentioned you can use it for Atmos. You can play peak noise, and you can adjust your Atmos speakers so you get an even hiss. And what you're doing is called time energy trading, also known as time intensity trading, where you're basically dialing in the speakers using the on and off axis to manipulate the sound at the seats. Now let's look at what happens, some client feedback when you get this dialed in perfectly. Again, he's using the Triad Rotosat, which is the only in-ceiling speaker that I know that can pull it off. I use this speaker all the freaking time. It's just to give you a brief example or a description of it, it's a very large Atmos speaker on a 45-degree angle. The woofer sits on a 45-degree angle. The tweeter is on a little arm with the laser, and you can aim that little booger anywhere. I mean, it will go 70 degrees. We even use it for when we don't have a back wall. I'll use it for rears. We'll just push it back so it's about 20 degrees above the 0-180 line, kind of where rears would be if you had a riser. You know, they'll be about that because you have a slanted bed layer. So we're just getting low enough to where it sounds like they're properly located. And we'll use that speaker in the ceiling, and it works fantastic. So this is what this guy had to say when he dialed in his Atmos. Wowza, the laser sight for Atmos is a game changer. I put in the Atmos demo disc and it sounded nice, but felt my Atmos imaging was a bit off. Holy bleep, I can't afford the real bleep. I dialed in the lasers to what looked like a better bubble, and wow, the immersion factor, or the immersion was fantastic afterwards. So I'm smiling ear to ear. Again, I mean, you can see how excited this guy is and what a huge difference it made. Didn't move speakers, all he did was adjust the toe in. But I mean, if you just spend $1,000 on some speakers that, you know, even if they have 45-degree, you know, they're aimed or locked at 45 degrees, you can't do this. If you've got speakers that are 22 or 30, you know, you definitely can't do this. You can't even hit the main listening position. Even if you go, you know, I don't go 45 forward. You guys, maybe you've seen episode 49 that kind of walks you through how to lay out your Atmos. You know, it's a little bit closer, not quite as far out. We're making sure we have plenty of separation, making adjustments. If we have a slanted bed layer, you know, it kind of 48, I believe, also kind of goes over how to adjust them. Of course, I do room plans, so if you need help with that, just, you know, my information is in the description of the video. But you've got to have a speaker that allows you to dial in your aiming so you can really dial them in. You know, if you don't have the capability, your Atmos is maybe fantastic. You don't know what you don't know until you hear something. You hear what you're missing. And remember, if you're not on axis of a speaker, you know, your speaker may be rated for 90 dB sensitivity. You're like, oh, it's got pretty good sensitivity. If you're aiming down at the floor, you're not getting a 90 dB sensitivity speaker. You might be lucky if it's 85 dBs now because it's not aimed. By being able to aim the speaker, you're also maintaining the output. You're not overstressing that speaker by boosting it with room correction because you're trying to overcome sitting so far off axis. So there's some things to consider there as well. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this one. If you got any questions you want answered, drop them down in the comment section below. You might be on one of the future Q&A episodes. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when the new videos come out, and I will talk to you guys next time.